Okay, this is a CIS180 week 2. We're going to go over week. You're going to be turning in a chapter 1 quiz. You get 3 attempts, untimed, max score, discussion, programming assignment. Before you begin the quiz or discussion or programming assignment, I do suggest completing the chapter 1 reading and examples. You have multiple tutorials in each chapter. The way they're designed is to read and do, and the more you program, the easier this is going to be for you. So I would always tell beginning 180 students to allot at least 5 hours minimum a week for your programming. And if you're a morning person, I'd make it early morning, maybe 2 or 3 days a week, split up the 5 hours. If you're an evening person, same, 2 or 3 days a week. That way it's not too much in one day. And then at the end of your chapter reading and examples, there's multiple try this throughout the book, which I suggest to do. And then you can jump right into your chapter 1 quiz, which again is 3 attempts, untimed, a max score. A discussion here that has to do with chapter 1. Just post your thoughts on that question I give you, and then programming assignment. Also here, beginning with this week, you'll have an area for notes, which is just a PDF of a PowerPoint for that chapter. We'll go over some of the components in the podcast each week, along with a finished example of your program assignment. And so let's go ahead and begin. I'll first start with the notes for chapter 1. So hopefully by now you had a chance to install 2010. I noticed most of you already submitted your test hello program in the week 1 assignment Dropbox. So let's go ahead and begin with chapter 1 on Visual Basic Reloaded 2010, Introduction to Visual Basic 2010. So we're going to look at the interface, integrated in development environment. The IDE is what it's called. The makeup of the windows, the properties, controls that you can add to a form, a label, button, picture box tools, and options. Also how to enter code in the code editor. You did that a little bit last week if you did the hello program, where I showed you how to create the hello program and to package that application, meaning packaging, meaning right-clicking and zipping on, compressing that folder for the project. Save a solution, starting and ending an application, printing application's code and interface. For this class, I will not have you be printing any application code, but it does show you in the book how to do it. To save paper, I generally don't do that or require students to do that. It's good enough to see it on the screen. Unless you're having an issue with a certain segment of code, I wouldn't suggest printing the code's interface or application. Then we'll go into writing an assignment statement, printing the application's code and interface again, closing and opening an existing solution, finding and fixing syntax error. So, Visual Basic 2010 is an object-oriented programming language. The word object means anything that can be seen, touched, or used. A button, a label, a picture box, all of these items are some of the ones you'll use this semester. Text box is another one. A class is a pattern used to create an object. An instance is an object created from a class. Object is said to be instantiated. The word IDE, or the acronym IDE, stands for Integrated Development Environment. It contains all the tools and features needed to create, run, test a program. It includes Visual Basic, C++, C#, and F#. Now I'm going to stop real quick and go to the Visual Studio screen. We'll go ahead and close out the solution that I already had open here for We'll open it up later. So once this is closing it, when you first come to your welcome screen, restart the application, it should look like this. And you'll have two options: to open a new project, create a new project, or open an existing project. Down here it keeps a tally of existing recent projects that you've opened. And so when you go to open or create a new project, if you're creating one from scratch like we did last week, you do have the option in the Classic Express, to the Visual Basic 2010 Express, only for a VB type of application using Visual Basic. In the full version of Professional, you have all the other languages, as I mentioned in the discussion notes. But even in VB, you do have not just, we'll be using mainly all form applications this semester, but you also have a Windows Presentation Foundation client, which is more of a DOS base, along with this console app is a DOS base, a class library, and a web browser based application, a WPF browser application, which we'll create towards the end of the semester. We can create web page type of application, website type of applications. So I'll go ahead and create a default Windows application. It's going to create the solution, the default solution for us. And the default name is always going to be Windows Application 1. If you were to create this by default, that's what it would be created. Again, I'm going to close this project just to do it one more time and discard it. Go back and do a file, new project. This time I'm going to change the name to just test application. We selected Windows Forms application is going to be default always. Here's the name and click OK. Now as soon as I've done that, while that's loading, I'm going to go ahead and go into my computer just to show you where these files are being created. And so in here, when you go into my computer, you can go into your My Documents on the left side, and you should see a Visual Studio 2010 folder, then Projects. Go back one more. Open up the wrong folder, I believe. Go ahead and save this. Now when I save this, hit the save button, you'll notice it's defaulting it to my Visual Studio 2010 projects folder is what I have opened here. It's not in there yet, but as soon as I hit save, you'll note it creates it in the projects folder. With the default forms for a Visual Basic application and folders. The default forms and folders are right here. The default forms is going to be a Form 1, a project file that launches the application, a bin folder which has all your executables in there that's created. Right now, it's not going to have any executables in here initially, except for a test application host file. And so let's go ahead and exit out of this. I just wanted to show you where it was found, and then we'll use this screen, actually, this template application, this test application, to build upon throughout the discussion. Now, application is basically just a program or suite of programs. When Microsoft Office has, Word, Access, Excel, PowerPoint. The term Windows-based application has a Windows user interface, and what that means is basically you can click items, generally use right-click, left-click mouse, drag items sometimes within the user interface. A Windows-based application runs on a personal computer from, say, Windows XP up to present-day Windows 7. The term user interface is what the user sees and interacts with using an application. It could be buttons, labels, and text boxes. A web-based application that we'll create towards the end of the semester has a web user interface, runs on a server, and is accessed with a computer browser outside of the server on someone's computer. The Windows application consists of projects and files, as I mentioned earlier when I showed you the test application folder. It has a solution that contains the stores of projects and files for the entire application. Project, a container that stores files associated with a specific portion of the solution. And a solution can also have one or more projects. So an illustration would be solution project files. A solution would be the actual drawer of a cabinet. The project would be a folder within the cabinet, and then file would be files within the project. So hopefully you've already had a chance to start Visual Studio 2010, so I will not go over this screen. Already went over the basic window application creation, so I will not go over that. Now this screen does show some default setups and options. That I would suggest just leaving alone. And for the Express Edition, all you're going to have as options is Windows Form Application. The one we're going to use anyway is Windows Form Application. This screenshot shows a full Visual Studio professional version. But you were able to see the drive letter and name of the project as you create it. Here's the part we just went over on creating a new application. So again, let's go over now the IDE interface. One of the ones I want to highlight is there is times possibly to where you'll lose where your menus are within Visual Studio. An easy way to get it back to default is to click the window on the menu bar, then click Reset Window Layout and click the Yes button. Let me show you what I'm talking about. When you first open up a project, one of the things I had to do in the video last week, in the podcast last week, was to pin this toolbox with the auto hide as such. So over here is your toolbox that has all your objects, buttons, labels, text boxes that in a second we'll throw on the form here and play with it. On the right side is Solution Explorer, which gives you all the files. And I believe I showed you last week how you can click on this Show All Files to indeed see all the files, even the hidden files for your program. Then the properties is actually the properties of the object you've clicked on. In this case, it's Form 1. So these three components, properties, Solution Explorer, and Toolbox, is needed within your access at all times. You'll be using these all the time. So let's say, for instance, you delete these. Maybe you need more screen to look at or something. You want to bring all those back easily. You go up to the window menu, reset window layout, say yes, and everything comes back. That's the easiest way to bring everything back. There are other ways to do it manually, but that's the easiest way to bring it back. To do it manually, up in the toolbar here, you have the option here for Solution Explorer, Properties, and then Toolbox. So that's where it's done individually. Easiest way, as I mentioned though, is Window, Reset Window Layout. Now, when you're creating Windows Form application, there's always the Form Designer which has a GUI, a graphical user interface, is what the user sees exactly and interacts with. It also has a Windows form, which is a foundation for the user interface, and you can add such things as button, text boxes, has a title bar with a caption that can be minimized, maximized, and closed. And the tab at the top of the designer is form1.vb.design. So if we look at this example, there's form1.vb.design, and as mentioned, we can add button. Possibly we might want to go in and throw a text box on there, and maybe a label, just for this example here. And you can also click on the form and resize it. You can select multiple objects like I just did with the mouse. And we can rename these. The two properties mainly you're dealing with on labels or on most objects is the name and the text property. So there's a name property, LBL name. The text, I'm going to put in enter first name, colon. For the text, I'm going to, text property is going to be empty. The name, txt, first name. And then the button, btn, submit. And change the text property to button or to submit from button 1. So we've got 3 objects on our form now. We've got a label, text box, and button. Here is the form object, label object, text box object, button object. The form object will also rename from the default form 1 to FRM test app. And I'm going to change the title as well to test app. So you notice to change the title, then save, or you can do a Control S to save. So we've done all of that in the beginning little test application. Now this is actually going to be the name in the folder itself. This form1.vb is actually one of the file names in the folder when you go through and look at it for the project. So if we go into the folder for this project, test application, there is a form1.vb and the form1.designer.vb. And this is the designer.vb, and you'll notice if I hit the plus menu over here, it shows the form1.vb, form1.designer.vb, and form1.res. Okay, so if I were to double click on this form1.designer.vb, you notice it brings me to some code, which generally for this semester you will not touch this code. This is actually compiled and created upon the creation of this form. But if I was to double click on this blue bar here, it would take me to what's called a form load of the application. Here you'll notice much less code. In fact, pretty much a shell of a code. This is where you begin to add in your information, such as name, well, first of all, a comma, an apostrophe, I'm sorry, to create a comment. So I'm going to put name, check console, application, test app, we'll put chapter 1 and today's date, January 23rd. So I want this on the top of all of your applications. Again, name, the name of the application, and chapter, and the date. So this section here is actually called Code View. I'm going to save that. Code View allows you to do just that. Enter in code behind the form to perform some function. What function this would create upon the load event is when this form loads, this is actually what runs first when this form loads up. And so if I was to put a simple message box in here, MSG box, and then left parentheses, beginning quote, and the word hello, end quote, and parentheses, it's going to allow us to see that when we run this application, it's going to pop up the word hello for us to see. So while that's rendering here, let me go ahead and go back to the PDF. So in the Solution Explorer, you also list, as I mentioned earlier, the projects contained the solution, displays the items contained in each object, like we're currently on the form1.vb. The source file is just a file containing program instructions. Code is the program instructions itself. An example would be the program instructions I just typed in the program. The test app called MSG box, left parentheses, beginning quote hello, end quote, right parentheses is a code instruction, a program instruction. A form file is a file containing code associated with the Windows form. Make sure and give each form file a meaningful name using the properties window. Like I mentioned in this program here in the test application, I named this one FRM test app. So now I've created this MSG box hello. I'm going to save all and just run this application just to show you how this is going to actually hit first upon the running of the application because it's in the load method of this form. Okay, so while this is running here, it's compiling, going through the code, and there is the hello message that's in the form load. I click OK, and then it goes to the actual form. Now you might be thinking, how does it know which form to load? In the Solution Explorer, if you right-click on the Solution Explorer name of the project, in this case it's test application, right-click, go to Properties. One of the first general areas we come to is the application itself. It says the assembly name is generally going to be name of the application, same with the root namespace. It tells the type of application it is, what the startup form is, and here is where the form test app is created or is used. And the reason it's a startup form is it's the very first form in the application that generally is going to be your startup form. Okay, going back. So let's continue. So property, which we've looked at already, where we change the name and text property of the object, it determines the object's appearance and behavior. Property window displays the selected object, and the default properties are usually assigned when an object's created. Like when a new form is added, it's form 1, new text box added, it's text box 1, new label is added, it's label 1, so on and so forth. So here's just a screenshot of some of the property windows for form1.vb. The properties window has in an objects box and a properties list box that you can sort alphabetically or categorized. The way I like to view mine generally when I'm viewing these is the alphabetical. You can view these in alphabetical format. Even though it's alphabetical, you'll note the name property will always be at the top of the property, regardless if it's alphabetical or categorized. Okay. Let's go on to some of the terminology here. Class definition. basically a block of code that defines attributes and behaviors of an object, which has a namespace, which I've looked at earlier on the property, is a group, defines a group or related class. A .member access operator, the period that separates a word and object's name to indicate its hierarchy of namespaces, and a name property used to refer to that object within the code and again give it a meaningful name. Example would be the name property for the form I gave was form test app. Label, LBL name, text box, TXT first name. Also with a naming convention, make sure you do bookcase caps on the first letter of the word. So I have TXT. The beginning of the name generally tells what type of object that is. In this case, it's a text object. That generally is always lowercase. But then if you have a name or two, make sure you caps the names. So first, F and first is caps, and a name is capsed. And then submit, BTM for button, submit with the S capsed. Pascal case, first letter of each word again in the name should be uppercase. First part of the name is the object's purpose. Second part is the object's class. Text property controls the caption, as I changed in the text property here of test app, or form 1. It was form 1. I changed it to test app. Text property for this one default was label 1. Changed it to this, enter first name. Text property of submit 1 was button 1. I changed it to submit, again in the text property. Startup position. This determines where your form will load upon the startup of the application. On this form 1, if we go to the startup position, you'll notice it's a Windows default location. It's generally wherever your mouse is at the time is where it goes to. We can change it to center of the screen. And what that would do is actually when we run this application later, it's going to run it in the center of my monitor. Font is just general shape of the font. Font point is the font size. Toolbox we've looked at already. Just contains all the objects needed for to be added to a form. Each tool has an icon and a name. Each tool represents a class from which objects call controls and can be created. A control is objects displayed on the form, represented as icons in the toolbox. Controls on the form can be selected, sized, moved, deleted, locked in place, so on and so forth. And so you'll notice on the form app here, these items can be moved. What they're talking about being locked in place is I can actually select these items, right click, and lock these controls, and by doing so I cannot move these items now. I generally don't recommend that until after you've made sure the placement of your objects are where you want them to be on your form. Then you can lock them for further safety if someone is mistakenly unlocking those objects, or you yourself mistakenly moving those objects. Okay, just another screenshot of a toolbox. We've already showed how to add a control to a form, so I will not do that. Talked about label, camel case, talked about that. I call it bookcase. Here's an example of a wizard application using a user interface. Has a label, picture box, 3 buttons. Button control basically performs an immediate action when clicked, and it says in the book it should end with button. I don't really use that and don't want you to use that. Now, applications that you open up within the book, it's fine to keep them that way, but to keep things so I know that you understand where I'm coming from. I want to make sure that all button controls, the only thing I'm asking for is that you begin the button name with BTN. Ending it, you can do so if you want to, but I don't require it. Beginning it, I don't want all buttons to begin with BTN. The text property just specifies the text that appears on the button. Picture box control, This is used to display an image. For picture box control, I'd like for you to start, if you use a picture box in a form, which I know you will, PB, starting with the name, like say it was maybe a picture of a wizard, PB's wizard would be fine, with the W caps. And then image property specifies what image you want to display. And on that one, you'll find you can browse out to your computer to display that image. Size mode, the first image that you put on a form, it's best to play with it and what the size mode property does. You have a couple of settings, normal, in fact 3 settings, stretch image, auto size, center image, or zoom. In fact, they've upped it to 5 settings now. They used to have 4 settings, now they have 5. Next is a format menu. Here you can actually format objects, like aligning them, making them the same size. And again, this first chapter is just going over all the different definitions. You will not be using all of these the very first week or two, so don't be concerned about that. The events, let's go right to the code editor. This is the user actions while performing an action while in a program, like clicking, double-clicking, scrolling. The event procedure is a set of instructions to be processed, tells the objects what to do, and the code editor window is used to enter the event's procedures code. So I'm going to go ahead and end this. There's more to the notes, but I'm going to stop there and go right to the application, if we could, for this week. But before we do, I'm going to go ahead and code a little bit on this one. The way I want this application to work is, I'm going to first of all get rid of the code there in my load app or load method. Let's talk about the code view of your application. On the left you've got events, and then the right's the load. Again, events are all the objects generally on your form. You'll notice we have a button, label, and text box. On the right is the events that could happen to that object. There's going to be, and sometimes hundreds of type of events. The easiest way to get to an event of an object is to first of all figure out what is this application doing. Well, in this application, it's going to run. I want the cursor to go here and blink for the user to enter in their first name. And when they hit submit, it's going to pop up a message box that says thank you, comma, whatever the first name is, for running this test app. So let's go ahead and double click on the submit. And I'm going to go ahead and put in here into a message box the message I talked about earlier. I'm going to say thank you, comma, and then the name of the text box. It's txt first name. You'll notice when I just typed in txt, it brought that up. I just double clicked on it. Dot operators I talked about in the chapter. If I hit the dot operator, it gives me some of the methods available. In this case, I just want the text property to pull in what they typed in. So thank you, comma, space, whatever the first name is. Another ampersand. This is going to be concatenating the string together, which you'll learn more about that later. For using my test app. End quote. And parentheses. So I have thank you, comma, space, end quote, ampersand, txt, first name dot text, space, ampersand, space, beginning quote, space, for using my test app. I'm going to go ahead and save it, run the application. It's going to compile through and see the changes made in the code. It should say on the bottom left, build started or build succeeded. It should run center of my screen, since we changed the property to run center. Type in my first name, hit submit. Thank you, Chuck, for using my test app. All right, now let's purposely throw in an error on this. The chapter does talk about this. Say, for instance, I mistakenly forget something in here, like maybe write parentheses. I forget that. Try to run the application. There were build errors. Would you like to continue and run the last successful build? Always select no. It'll take you right to the error. If you double click on the error in the error list, it'll take you right to the line of code where that error comes from. So there's the error. There's the expected right parentheses. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this to actually do what it says. And a lot of times it will give you the right suggestion, sometimes it won't. But again, always say no when it errors out, double click on the error or errors, and start at the very top line and work your way down. Because sometimes you'll have an error on line 1 that after you fix it, it completes the rest of the errors or fulfills the rest of the errors. Okay, now let's get to this week's solution, which if we go back to our week 2 here, it's week 2 program assignment, Dropbox. You're supposed to be doing the Complete the Cleese project, Castle's Ice Cream Parlor, Chapter 1, pages 76 and 77. You do get extra credit in this one by adding color, readability, formatting, pictures, so you can add other things to this application besides what the book has you add. Here's a link to how to package and send it once you're finished, as we went over in the video last week. That you can watch that again if you want to on how to submit, or you can just follow the instructions here. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the View Start page. There is my Castle solution. I'm going to quickly go over this. It won't take too long. It's not a real difficult application. This first view actually, and in fact none of these this semester are very difficult applications. They just reinforce the concepts you're learning in that chapter. So this one's a Castle's Ice Cream Parlor. It's got 4 buttons, a label, and another label here to kick it out to. You'll notice in the book it does use button at the end. What I would like you to do, as I mentioned in the podcast earlier, you can keep button on here if you want to on the end of the name, but I also want you to put BTN on the front end. All right? So I'm going to go ahead and change these real quick to fit that. Make sure to unlock these here. Okay, so I'm going to go through and change these real quickly here. I'm just going to put BTN on the front end, and I'm going to caps the B in banana just to keep that bookcase logic. Now, there's nothing wrong with the book's way of doing it. It's just when you get in the programming in the real world, generally naming conventions work as I'm having you do it, where you have the naming conventions start with the type, BTN for button, TXT, so on and so forth. I'm going to go ahead and leave button on the end of these. I'm not going to delete those. I'm just trying to do this to show you what I'm looking for. Okay, I've already renamed all the buttons here, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the code view just to look at it from the top side down. At the top of the code, where it says public class main form, is where you're going to put in your information, as always. This one here. Castle's Ice Cream. can do chapter 1 is fine, and date. Okay, that's good enough. Save it. Okay, let's look at the code first before we do anything. The way this application is supposed to run is the user clicks on one of the price buttons, whether it be banana split, sundae, milkshake, and then displays that price onto the price label. It has an exit button as well, which just closes the application. And so that's how this application is functioning, or functions. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the form view here. Again, button, banana split, sundae, milkshake, exit, and then depending on the button they click here, shows a price, and then exit will exit. So if I double click on banana split, it's got the name of the label, price label.txt equals $1.79. For sundae, it's price label.txt equals, in quotes, 0.99. And then milkshake button kicks it to the price label.txt 225. And then the exit button just closes the application. So let's go ahead and run the application to see how it works. Now in this application, I do not have any images or anything, but you could put an image of an ice cream or a sundae here as well if you wanted to. You wanted to show a price or show a picture of a ice cream parlor possibly. Down here you can do that for extra credit. So we have banana split, sundae, milkshake, and then finally exit the application. So again, as I mentioned earlier, for extra credit, just a thought, you don't have to do this. It's just 20 points extra credit. You can maybe put a picture box under here as an example. Maybe just move these up and over just a little bit. Go, and I'll go out and find a picture of a ice cream parlor real quick. Just Google one real quick and find an image. Show you how simple it is to add an image to your application. So we'll use that as an example. Go ahead and save that image. I'm going to actually go and put it in my documents where my program's actually located at. I'm going to go in projects, test application, and I'm going to put it in the bin directory. In fact, let me go back and put it right here in the test application directory. I'll leave bin, my project, an object open. So right in the test application directory, I'm going to keep it the same name here and save it. Go back to my castle project here, click on the image, and go down to the image property. But before I do that, let me rename this to PB, and I'm going to just type in ice cream. Right, go down to the image property. It allows me to browse out on my computer to import that image. I believe it did on my documents, Visual Studio 2010, projects, test application, there it is. And There's the picture. Click OK. And now it should be importing that image into the application. Once it imports the image into the application, then you are allowed to resize the image, move the image around, and such. Like for instance, I'll probably want to do the stretch to where it fits that text box or that picture box better. So let me go down and do that. I'm going to do the size mode from normal to stretch image to where it fits it nice and neat. Save it just to show you what the final one looks like here. You'll notice a save option or save disk here will, a lot of times if your computer's busy like mine, it'll flash back and forth. That's normal. It's just showing you it is saving the object, it is saving the project. And depending upon what you've added, since this is a new image, it does have to go through and update all properties of this application and embed this image into the form for further use. So I'm going to go and play it now. Build is started over here on the left. So the application is started. And there we go. There's our nice image of a ice cream parlor. Go next to the application. Now, two more things. I'm going to show you how to, you want to close this application once you're finished before you try to package it and upload it to Eagle. So I'm going to close the project and then go to the application folder. In the application folder, just a reminder from last week's, in the bin folder and the debug folder, there is now this test application that can be run by itself in a folder outside of Visual Studio or Visual Basic here, and it'll run in and of itself, that test application that we ran earlier. Okay, but for the ice cream parlor here, we'll just go ahead and pretend it's this one right here. It's the test application. We'll right click and it'll be in your projects folder. Send to compressed. Once it gets through compressing, the file will be created, and that's the one that you'll upload into week 2 Dropbox. So any questions you might have, please email me in Eagle. I'll also be online as always through the evening, Monday and Wednesday mainly, and then through the week at times. So you can check on Eagle if I'm online. You can ask me any question. I'd be more glad to help you. Otherwise, just recap, we do have your quiz this week for Chapter 1. We also have the discussion question and the application, the ice cream parlor application. So I hope you have a great week.